Right, so, there was a lot going on in episode 5, and I'm all here for it. We got a ton of big revelations about what's going on Earth, and we got the backstories to the rest of our core cast of characters. Now I know that everyone and their mum is going to do a video about Sin, Absolute Solver and all of that mess, and I'll never be able to cover in one video what Cartoon Universe is doing in 7, so I'm not going to try. Instead, I'm going to tell you a story. The story of the 3 characters this series is named after. This is the story of the Murder Drones. Oh, and Tara is back, by the way. We begin in a factory assembly line on an Earth built on the ideals of the early 1800s. Big and industrial. N-0x001001V0 comes off the factory line the same as any other drone and is sent out to a house, restaurant, business, or somewhere similar to work. However, due to his strong personality and somewhat clumsy nature, he's marked for disassembly and sent back to JC Jensen in order to be properly disassembled. Being the shady corporation that it is, they do not do this, and instead just throw him into an industrial wasteland for the crows to feed on. This was much cheaper than proper disassembly, and it hadn't backfired for them so far. The executives knew that there were some risks associated with it, but it was worth saving the bottom line. N sat in the junkyard for only a few days before he was scooped up off the broken drones and taken in by a shadowy figure. We come to know her as Tessa. She brings N back to her family manor and replaces his tattered clothes with those of an Elliott Manor butler drone. Her dad went through them so fast that there were always a couple spare sets lying around in the various washrooms. She fashioned him a hairstyle from a false white hair that her mother used for her wigs, not daring to use any of the expensive dyes that made the hair look human. N was then introduced to another drone with a bright yellow marked for disassembly band, this one sporting long white pigtails and a permanently frustrated expression. Jay was bought by a business firm and worked as a servant for a high-ranking executive in the company. As well as learning how to be a servant, Jay quickly picked up on the shrewd practices of running a large organization, and a personality developed to match it. After the company decided to upgrade to a newer model, Jay suffered the same fate as N, being rescued by Tessa during one of her first trips to the junkyard. Always looking out for a good opportunity, Jay immediately went to work trying to gain Tessa's favor. She worked as one of the servants in the Elliott Manor and acted as a friend and companion for the otherwise lonely girl. She would learn to hide her cold, sarcastic attitude around the humans for fear of being thrown in the trash, and would eventually just become another part of Elliott Manor. V was the second of the 3 to be brought home. Marked for disassembly after her elderly owner passed away, she'd been brought in by the family after their own children had left home, and had served them for several years. Being treated as more of a part of the family than a servant to it, she was taught to be kind and gracious towards all people, and developed a soft demeanour. However, this led her to become incredibly attached to the aging couple, and their untimely deaths struck her down with a level of sorrow previously not thought possible for drones. This grief planted a seed of hatred against the unfairness of the world deep in her programming, a desire for others to feel the same pain that she had, to experience the agony of losing those who make you whole. For a time, the 3 lived as part of the household. Mr. and Mrs. Elliott were not the most approving of them being there, given their bright yellow bands, but as long as they kept out of the way, there was no reason in going through all the trouble to get rid of them. Tessa, on the other hand, fell in love with the drones. They acted as her family, the brothers and sisters and friends that she had never had access to. So, she began to collect more.
Time after time, Tessa would beg her parents to go out to the junkyard, always coming back with a new drone marked for disassembly. They had collected various injuries and malfunctions from their time out in the elements, but Tessa didn't care. She spent months learning everything she could to help her robotic family, studying handbooks and guides and learning how to fix any and all software and hardware issues the drones faced. She got so good at it that her father began to talk with the head of engineering at JC Jensen in order to find her work there, with plans for an apprenticeship that would be started in the coming years. Tessa, however, was content staying at home with her drones. Why make new ones when the old ones worked just fine? That was, until she found Sin. Sin was different, and all of the drones noticed it immediately. Sure, Tessa had brought back some drones in a pretty bad state before, but nothing like Sin. She struggled with even the most basic motor functions, often not being able to hold her own head up for more than a few seconds at a time. She moved like a puppet, swinging her limbs in wide, exaggerated expressions complemented by a jarring, robotic voice that felt the need to caption almost every action. Her presence was unsettling. Just being in the same room as her put most of the drones on edge, the two exceptions being J and N. Jay was used to being around unsightly people, so this was no different, and N had his fear programming messed up by the crows, giving him a permanently positive outlook. That, Tessa didn't feel the need to fix. But for V, the story was far different. Sin crept into her mind, infecting it like a virus and corrupting her system. The seed of hatred inside her was fostered, encouraged to grow by that robotic voice. Slowly, it consumed her, fought her mind, and won. The kind, quiet V was gone. In her place, a husk, infected by the parasite that was Sin. Her body shut down, freezing in place, while her mind continued to rot inside, losing all sense of good and right that she had once been taught, losing her care for others. Now, there was only the hatred.
Tessa found V standing in the middle of one of the manor's many hallways, her visor flashing a bright yellow X with the text underneath it reading Error 606. How? Removing the worker drone operating system required a full factory reset, and the only person in this building who knew how to do that was her. Scared of what her parents would say if they found her, Tessa dragged V into a dark corner of the library and began to get to work. It was only after a week that she resigned herself to failure. Why was nothing working? She knew the brains of these things like the back of her hand, yet nothing she tried worked. It was almost as if something was fighting her, stopping her from bringing her friend back. Dejected, she left V standing there in the library and walked away. Over the coming weeks, Jay would start to notice something was wrong. Being Tessa's closest thing to a friend, she knew all about what had happened to V and Tessa's failed attempts to fix it. As more drones started to suffer the same fate, she began to work a theory as to what was happening. Noticing the effect that being around Sin had on the others, Jay felt that she was the cause of the problem and knew that something must be done about her. But Tessa still loved that drone, in the same way that she loved all of them. Just telling her that Sin was the cause of all this would certainly get her sent back to the junkyard, or at the very least lose her relationship with Tessa. So instead, she used her relationship, manipulating the way Tessa saw Sin, slowly but surely getting her to despise that drone. She convinced Tessa to throw her away in the basement under the library for long periods of time, only letting her out in order to make sure that N didn't catch on. N had a different view of Sin than everyone else. Being naturally accepting, he took Sin under his wing as a sort of little sister. Feeling bad that none of the other drones seemed to like her, he spent much of his time caring for and taking care of Sin. The time he didn't spend with her was instead spent in the library. N was devastated when he first found out what had happened to V, and was determined to do whatever he could to try and get her to start thinking again. He chose to do this by reading a large selection of books, big and small, new and old, to the unconscious V. He would talk to her and show her things, let her know what was happening outside the library and how Tessa was doing. He wasn't quite sure if anything he did was helping to wake her up, but he swore that once or twice she had moved or made a faint sound when he got to a particularly interesting part of a book. Unfortunately, while he was trying his best to fix the mind of his friend, N began to lose his own. It started with small, barely noticeable gaps in his memory. A lost name here, a forgotten book there, but soon it would escalate. He began to lose track of days, friends, even who he himself was. He deteriorated quickly, eventually not even being able to find his way around the manor without following Tessa or another drone. He felt more and more inclined to stay in the library for longer and longer, almost like he was drawn to this strange presence surrounding it. One day, he found a small trapdoor, opened at the end of one of the halls of the library. He thought it seemed familiar to him, like he had spent time there before, but he could not remember when. Ever curious, he approached the open panel and peered down into it.
Jump scare!
Serial Designation N found himself inside a small metal pod careening through space. On his left sat the psychotic Killer V, and to his right, the stone-cold Commander J. He looked up at the large screen in front of him, its bright LEDs reflecting the task assigned. Disassemble all corrupted drones. So, I hope you guys like this new style of video. Obviously it's not meant to be proving any part of the lore, but I think it's an interesting idea for how the story of these three could have played out. I'm probably going to be steering away from the more traditional style of theories from now on, since I never seem to get it right, and to be honest, there are other people out there who are way better at this than me. Thank you to Tyromaniac for once again helping me out with some of the voice lines for this video. If you want to take a closer look into the lore behind Absolute Solver and Sin, he has a video up on his channel right now that I'm also in. But that's pretty much all I got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.